The new regime means not only a change of government, but an entirely new state. King Savang Vatthana, titular head of the Kingdom of Laos for the last 16 years, abdicated, so bringing to an end a monarchy stretching back over 6 centuries. From the king's residence in Vientiane, the new People's Democratic Republic of Laos was proclaimed, a changeover carried out smoothly and without bitterness. Laos's new rulers even invited the king to be an official advisor to the government, a role they also reserved for another of the old regime's leaders, Prince Suvarnabhuma. He'd been prime minister of a series of supposedly neutral governments since 1962. But over the years, his real power declined as the Pathet Lao gained more control of the country. For the past 6 months, he's been virtually a figurehead of a government that was communist in all but name. Suvarnabhuma's power has in fact been transferred to his half-brother, Prince Suphanuvong, who's been the most prominent Pathet Lao leader during the last 20 years. He's now become president of the new republic. The new prime minister is Kason Pomivan, general secretary of the Lao People's Party. He's half Vietnamese and has close links with Hanoi, and it's generally believed he'll have more influence than the new president on the future course of events. For the time being, though, both new rulers and old leaders seem to be on the best of terms. Friendliness was certainly the keynote at the new government's first reception for members of the diplomatic corps. The heartiest congratulations came not unnaturally from the Soviet ambassador, whose country has more influence in Laos now than ever before. America's charge d'affaires was also there and seemed to accept philosophically that Pathet Lao rule in Vientiane had become inevitable after developments earlier this year in the rest of Southeast Asia. The takeover in Laos was certainly no surprise, coming after communist victories in neighboring South Vietnam and Cambodia. Yet it's not wholly accurate to see Laos as just another Southeast Asian domino, pushed over by the others. The communist advance in Laos had its own impetus and was many years in preparation. Geneva, 1962. 14 nations sign a treaty that's supposed to guarantee the peace and neutrality of the tiny kingdom after 8 years of civil war following the French withdrawal from Indochina. The conference drew up elaborate plans, including an international control commission to see they were carried out. Though the commission met a few times, it never established any effective control. The agreement remained a dead letter. The fighting in Laos continued. In the early 60s, the military struggle was inconclusive. The Royalists held the western half of the country and the Communists the east. Prince Suphanuvong and the Pathet Lao were intended to be equal partners in a national neutralist government, but the coalition soon ran into disagreements, and in 1963, the Pathet Lao left the administration to go into open revolt. They set up their own headquarters at Sam Mua in the northeast. Much of the early fighting took place on the plain of Jars, a relatively flat area in the north, which got its name from hundreds of ancient stone jars that were scattered across it. The jars were over 2,000 years old and were used to store grain, evidence of the peaceful and prosperous life the plain once enjoyed. But in the 1960s, most of them bore the scars of modern war. The war involved more than just Laotians. These neo-tribesmen, royalist and fiercely anti-communist, were often called the secret army because they were supplied, paid and organized entirely by money and officials from America's Central Intelligence Agency, though Washington never admitted this at the time. The Mios were tough fighters and bore the brunt of heavy communist assaults in the later stages of the conflict. The Laotian communists didn't fight alone either. Most of their hardware came from Moscow,